Okay, so what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of African architecture? Okay, so something like that, right?
Yeah, like a primitive structure.
And why do you think that?
Just first thing come up on my mind. It's like old, undeveloped, poor, unmodernized.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are looking into how contemporary society has a preconceived notion
Which
of
is
African
primitive
architecture.
and lacking in modernity and commodities that we see in our own homes. We want to show people that African architecture is on par with the rest of the world. So here are some more accurate examples of African architecture. There seems to be a mutual understanding that African society is less advanced than the rest of the world. And through the examination of the architecture of the Bight of Biafra by Joseph Galuski, we have determined that part of this may be begun with the arrival of the British on Africa's Gold Coast. The arrival of Europeans in the 16th and 17th centuries marked a significant turning point for African societies like Old Calabar. Explorers and traders documented their experiences, but their accounts were often marred by prejudice and misunderstanding. These early interpretations laid the groundwork for the distorted perception of African culture and architecture. It is crucial to acknowledge that the narratives produced during this time were not merely observations. They were reflections of the mindset that deemed African societies as other and inferior to European standards. While Europeans documented the grandeur of African structures, their narratives were frequently infused with bias, viewing these architectural forms through a lens of inferiority. This juxtaposition reveals a profound misunderstanding, as they often fail to appreciate the intricate cultural significance embedded within these designs. The result was a dichotomy that oversimplified and misrepresented the rich histories and values of African architectural practices.
So, where did this misunderstanding come from?
Young slaver John Waltz from his captivity by the Efik people. In merely 19 pages, Waltz's true relation derives a primitive barbarian imaging of Old Calabar society. The text also included observations of compounds, which are flexible, low, mud-built Efik houses secured by thatched roofs. Despite the construct's innovation and adaptivity to suit its decentralized society, Europeans interpreted compounds in a way more lowly than their own. Due in part to the flourish of the Baroque architecture in the 17th century, Europe was swayed by dramatic irregular curvature and grand ornamentals. By purposefully failing to consider the differences in architectural purposes, they were able to label the Efik compounds as something seemingly artless, creating a jarring luster. With the advent of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade, Eurocentric accounts like Walt's introduced a dangerous concept so powerful that it persists in the present day. The concept of white superiority and fully dehumanizing the people they enslaved by labeling them as inferior allowed white Europeans and Americans to justify their involvement in the slave trade. This antithesis serves not just to eliminate guilt by depriving Africans from their humanity, it also was a mean to elevate the European race into a superior light. The popularization of using black caricatures and blackface in minstrelsy shows as entertainment helped further reinforce these dangerous stereotypes.
It would be presumptuous to disregard slave trade's middlemen, especially King Ephraim of Duke Town. In John Stewart's Global Goods in the Country House Comparative Perspectives, Obong Ayembo was an unashamed proponent of the slave trade. He willingly sold off captured Africans and profited from their demise. Through this profit, in 1843, he commissioned for a grand iron palace, which, unlike what others have seen from African compounds at the time, this old Calabar architecture served to define the king's preeminence to both the locals and the Europeans. In the Pan Africanism world, it is crucial to acknowledge both the contributions of these middlemen and the hierarchical disparity which influences on the framing of vernacular African architecture.
Now, let's draw the camera back to the present. Under equality advocacy, people are striving to eliminate racial bias. While this is happening, we should not forget that the early routine misrepresentation of their architecture is also an underlying mechanism. We should consider the role of architecture theories while dealing with the long-lasting racial discrimination. Fortunately, scholars are working on that. Early Western records stereotyped and degraded African architecture. To resist that, Nigerian people introduced an alternative image of their past landscape. One example is the idea of compounds from Nigerian architect and writer Nemo Bassett, who portrays them as the natural result of connection between people and with their surroundings. This image emphasized the social harmony behind the development of their house structure. However, it is biased. This description creates an utopian picture of African architecture prior to European arrival. And what's wrong with this? It ignores the influence of negativities on the formation of compounds. Wars were prevalent back then. The ongoing and coming tribal war affected people's decision-making, culture, and politics. As Joseph Gluski pointed out in his book, war slaves were inhabitants of compounds played a crucial role in shaping its structures and the expectation of people living in it. Wars, violence, and slavery all shaped compound in a way no less influential than social connection do. Therefore, compounds are a mixed product of everything that happened in the entangling centuries. They are truly compounds and cannot be explained in single shapes. In short, accounts about compounds and their society flawed. They have truth while being biased due to their standpoints. So, is there a way we can dispel a folk-hunting old Calabar landscape? Ideally, if there's an objective way that tells everything as it is, we will have no more misapprehensions. However, humans have varying backgrounds and therefore varying standpoints, meaning there's no real objectivity. So, do we actually need a true objective view? Not necessarily. People are reusing ideas of traditional African structure in modern setting. Architects create more positive image of African architecture by bringing post-colonial interpretation into practice. This is a childhood development and family center by ASA Studio in Rwanda. It makes use of traditional compound structure, a series of individuals' houses surrounding a central space for community gathering. An excellent illustration of compound's essence in contemporary context. This practice not only means the participation of African voice in architecture, but also in cultural exchange, bringing together different perspectives in a holistic way. An example is South African architect Sumaya Valley's 20 Serpentine Pavilion. Situated in London, its purpose is to open conversation between the architecture of African and the West. Valley takes a series of space and folds them in a single room, aiming to reimagine structures so that they reflect who we are, by displaying London through the eyes of her culture. The way we supplement the picture of African architecture is by showing the world how it could be. It doesn't matter if some of the ideas we are taking from the past are mere imagination. At the end of the day, interpretation is a kind of imagination. It is architecture we are dealing with, not algebra. There's no perfect solution. Instead, we should seek resolution. It is not perfect, but humanistic. Let interpretation become storytelling and idealized dream. Let this biased viewing picture that used to only accept one color.